Everyone, and welcome to this morning's Zoom webinar presented by the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Moncton. Today, we're very pleased to have with us two people with Atlantic Wellness, counseling therapist Kelly Etheridge and Executive Director Andrew LeBlanc. My name is John Wishart, and I'm the CEO of the Chamber. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue au webinaire Zoom de ce matin, présenté par la Chambre de Commerce pour le Grand Moncton. Aujourd'hui, il est mon plaisir. Bienvenue Kelly Etheridge et Andrew LeBlanc. Je m'appelle John Wishart, je suis le PDG de la Chambre. Kelly and Andrew and their team at Atlantic Wellness do very important work in our community, offering mental health and counseling to adolescents throughout the region. And today we've asked them to speak generally about the importance of mental health during these unprecedented times of pandemic, self-isolation, working from home, and social distancing. And I know Kelly will also speak more specifically about the impact these days are having on our young people and how we might help them through this crisis. So before I turn the virtual podium over to Andrew and Kelly, I want to remind everyone that you can pose a question to them at any time during the presentation via the chat button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Just type your question there and I will keep track of those and pose as many as possible to Kelly as time permits at the end of the presentation. And also please note that we have muted everyone's microphone except for our presenter. So with that, I'll turn the podium over to Andrew to officially introduce our topic and Kelly. Andrew?
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And it's certainly a pleasure to be here. We're happy to be partnering with the Chamber on this great initiative. So as John said, my name is Andrew LeBlanc, the Executive Director with Atlantic Wellness, and we're an organization, a local charity, for those of you who don't know, that offers free mental health services for youth ages 12 to 21. And so prior to the pandemic, we obviously were seeing clients at our building on Lute Street. And so for us, we've had to make a lot of changes to adapt and accommodate, and now we're providing everything virtually. So it's important for us to know that our young people are still able to access mental health services. It was important for us to be able to maintain that connection with our clients. And so we're providing video therapy, phone call therapy, and text therapy right now. Doing everything virtually, and we're still open. And we also still have our clinic running, which is a great service to give people same-day access to mental health support services. And that runs every Monday. We can post some information. You can check out our Facebook page. You'll have all the phone number and everything for that service. So if you want to access that, it's a really great one to get immediate access to mental health supports in the community. You know, it's a really challenging time for young people right now, and we just want to make sure that the services are there to support them as they need it. But it's also a challenging time for parents and for the community in general as well. And so today's presentation will be more broad, I think, in talking about protecting our mental health. So now I'd like to introduce Kelly Etheridge. She's my colleague at Atlantic Wellness. So Kelly is a Canadian certified counselor and a licensed counseling therapist. She has over 20 years experience working with children and families, as well as facilitating a variety of parenting and wellness programs within the community. She joined the Atlantic Wellness team back in 2017. And in addition to providing individual counseling with the center, she often takes the lead on delivering a variety of school and community presentations and facilitates the Atlantic Wellness Parent Group. Kelly, also proud resident of Riverview, representing Riverview, thank you, and has 2 kids. So Kelly, we'll throw it over to you, and thank you everybody for having us today.
So hopefully everyone can see that. This is my biggest fear, is all the tech part of it. But thank you very much for inviting me to be here today to the Chamber of Commerce, and for that lovely welcome by my Executive Director, Andrew. Andrew already told you a lot about what we do, so I won't go through that part again. And he let you know that all our services right now are online. Just to kind of let you know how that's been received by our clients. They've actually done really well with it. At first, some people they were like, oh, I think I'm going to wait. You know, I don't know if I need it right now. But a lot of them decided that, you know, at first didn't really want the service, decided, oh, I think I might need it now that it's kind of lasting a little longer than they might have expected at first. And even the ones that chose to kind of wait until we're back in the center, we're still keeping in touch with them. We still like send emails and call and check on them. And if they're kind of a younger client, we check in with the parents and kind of provide support that way too. Our groups are not up and running yet. Andrew mentioned that I do the parent groups, but if this continues longer, which I think it probably will in terms of us being back in the center, we're looking to maybe try to offer our groups online somehow. So hopefully that will be coming soon. And Andrew told you a little bit about me. For everyone out there that's listening and watching this webinar, we may have crossed paths because I've worked in a lot of community agencies like Moncton Head Start, Support to Single Parents, Family Services Moncton, Family and Early Childhood, and I even taught prenatal classes for a couple of years. So I may have met you in one of those aspects. And Andrew said I have 2 kids and I live in Riverview. My daughter is 17 and my son is 13. So it's very nice to be speaking to adults today because I'm usually in teenage world at home and in for work. And I wanted to give a shout out to my dog. So I shared a picture of him as well, because those of you that have pets at home are probably feeling the same way, that they've been a really big part of kind of getting us through all of this. I don't know if my dog really likes it, but he doesn't really have a choice. I think we're kind of smothering him a lot. And I also wanted to put it out there that I consider myself pretty good with people, but not that good with technology. So hopefully we'll get through this without any glitches. I love doing presentations, but I usually have a tech person with me in case something, goes wrong, but hopefully that won't happen. So on to our topic of staying mentally healthy during a pandemic. I'm sure that most of you have heard, there's been a lot of talk of how to protect our mental health right now. And it's been a big focus in the media and a big focus of the education system too. When the schools first started, checking in on their students, that was their big focus, is how are they doing mentally? How are they coping with all of this? So I think that's been wonderful that we've put such an emphasis on mental health. However, what can sometimes happen is that it's almost like too much, right? We're just seeing it, so much and getting so much advice that it can become a little confusing of, what to pay attention to. And so I think hopefully what we can do today is just kind of simplify things and focus on, how it's really impacting us, but more importantly, how can we all just really take care of our mental health and, cope with all of this, because we've never done it before, and maybe even come out, being more mentally healthy and more resilient because of it. So just a quick agenda so you know what you're kind of in for. We're just going to briefly talk about mental health, how our mental health is affected, how to cope and stay mentally healthy, where to reach out for help, particularly in the greater Moncton area, and then we'll take any questions or comments at the end. Hopefully I won't talk too much so we have time. So I thought we would just start with kind of talking about mental health because, that's my world. So it's really familiar to me, but I sometimes forget that it might not be as familiar to everyone else. So I just wanted to kind of distinguish between mental health and mental illness, because that's one of the areas that kind of gets confused a lot. Mental health, we all have mental health, right? We all have physical health, and I think we all know that by this point, that it's kind of the same thing, mental health, physical health. But we don't all have mental illness. And it's something that we deal with a lot at our center because, we see kids that come in that maybe, are really sad after a breakup and think that they're depressed. Or, if they like things really organized, that they have OCD, or if they're really moody, that they have bipolar disorder. So we do a lot of education around that because that's, self-awareness is really kind of important to know what you're kind of dealing with so that you can get the best treatment. A mental illness is something that is, it's a brain-based medical illness that has to be diagnosed by a professional. And that's not something that we do at our center. we're not qualified to do that. That would have to be by, qualified, usually a psychologist. So our mental health has a continuum, the same as our physical health does. So if I was to ask all of you that are listening, how do you feel today? How is your physical health? I'm guessing some people might say, oh, I feel really great. Some people might, have a bit of a headache, or maybe you have a sore neck from being on your computer so much. So we accept that. We expect those kind of fluctuations in our physical health. And our mental health is the same way. We're not always going to feel great mentally. And we need to be able to kind of ride those waves and expect those fluctuations. And that's one way that we can really start to be mentally healthy, is just to kind of accept that and be okay with that. Another kind of way to look at it, hopefully you can see this on your screen, is if you look at the top when it says, your optimal mental health to feel really great mentally, you can have really great mental health and have a mental illness. So if you have a mental illness that's diagnosed and you have the proper treatment and you're taking care of it, then you can be quite mentally healthy. But the same goes at the bottom end of when you have poor mental health. You can, not be doing well with your mental health and not have a mental illness. So I just thought we would kind of start there, so we kind of have a basic understanding of what mental health is, not mental illness, and whether you have a mental illness or not. What we're going to talk about is going to be helpful for everyone, but we're mostly talking about just general mental health today. So how is our mental health affected? I was kind of unsure whether to use this picture because it's kind of busy, but then I thought, well, that's kind of how our minds are feeling right now, right? Our minds are kind of busy with all these different emotions. I'm sure you would all agree with that. And that's normal. It's normal to have that range of emotions, kind of feel a whole bunch of things at once. When my daughter was young and she was kind of having, I guess, conflicting feelings, I said, oh, it sounds like you have, mixed feelings. So she, used that term a lot, not quite correctly, and she would call it mixed up feelings. So I always use that now with parents and with my clients, that it's normal to have mixed up feelings. And it's normal for our feelings to change over time. When all of this first started, I know for myself, I felt kind of motivated, and, we had a family meeting and we did charts, and I was kind of like really into it for the first couple of weeks. I felt really invigorated almost. And that didn't last. After a few weeks, then it kind of like hit me, and then I started to feel kind of discouraged and tired. And so, I realized that, my feelings were kind of changing. Thankfully, I've kind of come back to be somewhat motivated, not as much as I was at first, but those fluctuations are, like I said, they're normal. And this is really all about kind of self-reflecting and checking in with yourself to kind of see what you're feeling. And we have to really be able to do that, with ourselves first before we can, provide any support to the people that are in our lives. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dr. Dan Siegel. He's a psychiatrist and an author, and he says you have to name it to tame it. So what that means is that we have to kind of check in with ourselves and figure out what we're feeling, give it a name. And once we can kind of figure that out, then we can tame it. We can kind of deal with it. So that self-reflection and self-awareness is really, really important. It's a great place to kind of start to take care of our mental health. And it's also important to remember that everyone reacts differently. And I would encourage you to, try hard not to kind of judge where anyone else is at. Sometimes we think we know how people should feel, and other people think they know how we should feel. But it's a unique experience. It's different for everyone. And I came across this poem, maybe some of you have seen it. It was posted with the Youth Mental Health Canada on the Youth Mental Health Canada website. And basically, the title says, "We're all in the same boat. We're not all in the same storm." So I thought, you know, because I just recommended that we all do self-reflection, that we would start with doing our own little self-reflection right now from wherever you are, probably at your home. And I would just read this and get you to consider where you are in the storm, okay? So use your self-reflection, think about where you're at as I read it. For some people, it's sprinkling. This is a break. It's a breather. It's a pause in the normal. It's a time to reconnect with family and slow down. Honestly, it's kind of peaceful. For some, it's a storm. It's a bit scary. It's disruptive. It's enough to make you stay up and watch the news and worry. For some, it's a hurricane. It's tearing at the boards and pulling off the roof. It's washing them out to sea. It's dark and unknown. It's life-changing. It's not wrong to be enjoying the sprinkles or enduring the storm, but please don't negate the difference. Rest with family, but don't minimize the hurricane engulfing your neighbor. Laugh at a meme, but get on your knees for your friends. Get in someone else's storm. So hopefully you're kind of thinking about that and thinking of where you are at in the storm. And as I said before, it can change, right? You might start off more kind of where it's sprinkling, and then you might, you know, move all the way to a hurricane. And I know with some of the young people that I work with, they almost feel guilty that they don't feel worse than they do. You know, for some of them, this is a break. School is their biggest source of stress, and being, you know, out socially, you know, gives them a lot of anxiety. So they're kind of almost enjoying this break. But then they're feeling guilty, like they're not normal because, you know, they don't feel that's what they should be feeling. So it's really important that we kind of accept where we're at and try to accept where other people are at too. Another kind of perspective on what, you know, we might be feeling right now and going through is if we look at it through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm sure some of you maybe studied this at university or came across it, you know, at some point in your careers. And basically Maslow's kind of theory is that we have to have certain needs met, you know, kind of at the base, and then we move up each kind of hierarchy, but you can't move up to the next level until those needs are met. And if you look at the bottom, the physiological needs, and then along with safety, it's really where a lot of people are at right now, especially the safety one, because you know, you have to have a sense of that you have security in your job, that your health is secure, that you kind of know how you're going to pay for things. And so much is uncertain for us that we don't necessarily have that sense of security right now and that sense of safety. And what can happen to us kind of mentally is when you kind of perceive a threat, right? When you don't feel safe and you don't feel secure, your body goes into, like, you have a stress response reaction, right? Because you're bracing yourself for whatever's going to happen. You perceive a threat and you're getting ready for it. So, you know, for most of us, we're in that kind of state, like, constantly right now, because we don't know what's coming next and we don't know when it's going to, you know, end. So it's not, I don't tell you that so that it's discouraging. It's, again, that self-awareness so that you can kind of like be understanding with yourself and gentle with yourself and say, oh, that's why this has been so hard, right? And that's why I really need to take care of my mental health, to try to bring that response system down, because I'm really, you know, I can really feel it and it's very exhausting. And even though we all experience, you know, this kind of storm a little differently, there's a general impact on our overall health, not just our mental health, but our overall health that many people are going through. So mentally, like I just said, your stress response system is activated. So that makes it really hard to focus and concentrate, and your memory's not as great. right? Emotionally, we have this range of emotions. Socially, a lot of us are feeling isolated and disconnected. We're wired for connection, and we're really missing that right now. Spiritually, that's more like, you know, your purpose. How do you find meaning? A lot of people are like, you know, especially kids, in terms of like doing schoolwork, they're like, what's the point? Doesn't even count, right? Like, I don't even know, you know, if I'm going to graduate. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get into university. My marks aren't going to matter. And physically, it's having a big impact, right? You know, more headaches. You might not be able to sleep as well. There's even a thing called pandemic dreaming. I don't know if you've heard of that lately, but even our dreaming is being affected. So all of these kind of reactions are really normal. But on to how we can cope and stay mentally healthy, which is probably why you tuned in today. First of all, if we just kind of look at what coping strategies are and how we can cope, coping strategies are not always a conscious choice. Lots of times they're unconscious, and we do a lot of education around that with our clients, because sometimes you don't understand why you're behaving a certain way, and you're like, why do I do that? And then when we explore it, you realize, oh, that helps you to cope. And once we can figure that out, then you can replace that maybe not so healthy way to cope with something that's healthier, okay? So if we look at unhealthy versus healthy coping strategies, and this is not to make you feel guilty, this is just to bring that awareness that, you know, without even realizing it, you know, subconsciously, you might be, you know, coping with things in a way that's not, that might feel good right now, but not necessarily be healthy long-term. So these are some common kind of unhealthy coping strategies: drug or alcohol use, overeating, procrastination, sleeping too much or too little. That's one that we see a lot with young people. Social withdrawal, self-harm is something, unfortunately, that's I would say on the rise with young people. And if you look at self-harm in particular, just how you can see that it's a way to cope. Kids, you know, self-harm, and people in general self-harm for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons is to feel some control. So right now, you know, most of us don't feel any control. Things are kind of happening that we don't have any say over, and everything's uncertain. And so, you know, self-harm can be a way that you can kind of feel like you have some control over things. So when we kind of acknowledge that and kind of get to the heart of it, then we can, you know, hopefully try to find a more healthy way to cope with getting some control. And aggression is another kind of more of an unhealthy way to cope. And, you know, I always say to kids that you feel more powerful to be angry than you do to feel scared or worried. So I think that's why some people turn to being more aggressive. Obviously, that's not going to be good for you or your relationships long term. So we kind of have to look at how can we do things in a healthier way that's going to have better long-term kind of results. So getting right into the healthy coping strategies, if you've been one of the unfortunate ones that have, you know, lost your job or lost your kind of financial security, there are some ways that you can kind of help to cope. It's certainly, I'm sure, not an easy thing to manage, but the first thing is to really just acknowledge those feelings of loss or grief. Just like, you know, we said in the beginning, you have to name it to tame it. To be able to kind of, you know, work with it and kind of deal with it and get on with things is just to kind of give yourself some time to feel it and work through it a little bit. And once you've had some time to kind of start to process it, then it's, you know, you can make a plan. And even though it's no fun to be at home and not working, it could be a time to kind of reevaluate where you're at in your career. Maybe there's some online training that you could do. You know, there's different things that you can apply for in terms of financial kind of support. So that can be part of all that planning. Take care of yourself is a big one, important for everyone, but you know, you kind of lose that sense of purpose. Bad enough to be home, but then when you're not working, so that's when you really need to up your self-care, up your, you know, exercise, eating right, sleeping well, all that stuff. And the last one is to reach out. We just talked about how, you know, being isolated can be a way to kind of cope, but not really a healthy way. And reaching out, you know, to friends and family and to your, even your network, you know, for work is really, really important, because like I say, we're wired for connection and we need that. And I know some of the people that we work with and just people in my personal life, you know, when they're struggling, you don't really want to reach out because you don't want to burden someone else, right? I hear that a lot. Well, I don't want to tell my mom because she already has enough to worry about. But that's, you know, it's, if you look at it, it's a way of helping someone else too, because then it gives them permission to share what they're feeling. And then you can kind of, you know, get that connection between the two of you. So it's really, really important that we don't stay isolated and that you reach out. If you're someone like myself who is, you know, trying to cope while you're working from home, I feel your pain, because it's certainly not an easy thing to do, but I am very grateful that that I am able to still work. Important to maintain your routine. So maybe you don't have to get dressed to do your job, but it's still a good idea that you do, right? Good idea you don't stay in your pajamas. So try to get up around the same time and, you know, go to bed around the same time and keep up with your meals. Whatever routine that you used to have, try to stay on that. Create a workspace. So for me, I'm down here in my spare room, which is kind of my office now. And when I, you know, go upstairs for lunch or go upstairs to spend some time with the kids, I try to leave my work here. I don't always, you know, I'm not always successful with it, but you should try to, even if you have a small space, create a workspace and then keep your work there. Don't kind of, because we already have that sense of everything's kind of, you know, messed up and kind of coming together. So we really need to try to have that separation to get that balance. Manage the kids. That's a really, really tough one for those of you who are working from home and have kids. I think it's especially hard if you have younger kids like Andrew does, but as a therapist, I would say, you know, probably make your kids a priority if you can. Obviously, there's going to be times that you have meetings and things that are really important, and that's when you know, let the kids know, you set it up. Maybe one of the older ones looks after the younger ones, and you know, obviously you have to make your work a priority sometime. But kids really need you to be, you know, available to them. So if they are in distress of any sort, I would say try to make them a priority and just kind of lower the expectations all around. Lower the bar as a parent, lower the bar as an employee, and just do your best, right? Do your best kind of trying to juggle it all. Avoid being isolated. So even though you might not have to connect with coworkers, do it. It can really help. I know one of our coworkers sends a message every single morning in our group chat to, like, say just good morning. And it's just a way to kind of connect us all and remind us that, okay, we're working at home by ourselves, but we're not alone. And don't overwork, right? You'd be like, what else can I do? I can't go anywhere, but you don't want to burn out. And, you know, when all of this is over and you're ready to go back to your, you know, kind of regular routine, you don't want to be burnt out and kind of just done, right? So I thought we would just do this super quick. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I know it's kind of hard to sit there and just listen. So a strategy that you can use anytime through the day, whether you're, you know, feeling stressed or not, is just to take a breather. We call this box breathing. And I like it because it has a visual of the 4 sides. And then it reminds you that, you know, there's 4 steps and you have to hold them for 4 seconds. So we start with breathing in through our nose, and then hold, breathe out, and hold. So I'm just going to ask you to get comfortable and just practice with, I can't see whether you're doing it or not, but hopefully you're all willing to participate. So we're just going to start by being comfortable, and you can close your eyes if you want. We're going to start by breathing in, 2, 3, 4, then hold, 2, 3, 4, breathe out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. Well, thank you for doing that if you did it. And remember, that's a tool that you can always kind of go back to, is just to stop what you're doing and do, your breathing for a couple of minutes. It can really help kind of bring you back to that relaxed state, kind of reset your body and kind of sustain you for whatever else you have to get through for the day. So the last section is helping our kids cope, and particularly youth, meaning kind of 12 and up. But all of these strategies are good for all of us, for any age. Just going to check the time. So the first one is to, really keep the communication going with our kids. You want to tell them how you're feeling, talk about what you're experiencing, obviously at their level. And the biggest one is that you want to listen. Okay, when they're explaining, how disappointed they are that they missed spring hockey, or that they're really missing, their friends, instead of trying to fix it or solve it or just kind of minimize it, the biggest thing that you can do is just listen and validate their feelings. So saying something like, oh, I can, really see that you're missing your friends, or sounds like you're super disappointed that you didn't get to, be in the school play this year. And that's all you really have to do, is just validate it. Lots of times with kids, we have to look more for their behavior rather than what they're telling us. And I always say it's kind of like you're a parent PI. You're like that, a private investigator trying to figure out what they're feeling, because they're not always going to tell you, but they often will show you, not always in the best ways. So that's really important too, is just to be kind of really in touch and in tune with what they're going through. Kids really need a schedule. It's the biggest thing they need that makes them feel normal. It helps regulate their bodies, their mood. We're all the same way that way. So if you can, try to keep on a routine. Limit media. That's a big one. A lot of kids say, like, I wish my parents would turn off the TV. They get really overwhelmed with hearing the news and then watching their parents' reaction to the news. So if you can, just watch the news a couple of times a day. Maybe try to do it when they're not around, but they're probably listening anyway. And help them to limit their social media and video games and all that stuff. Obviously, they're going to be doing more of it right now, and that's okay. But, give them other things to do. Offer, do you want to go for a walk? Or, oh, I'm just about to make cookies. Do you want to help? So kind of give them things to kind of replace their technology with, so they can get breaks from it. You want to help them stay connected, especially teenagers, because they are wired to connect with their peers. We just don't really cut it for them. And they feel sometimes bad about that, but it's just the way that it is. Their friends are really important to them at this age. And, I've heard from a lot of teens say, I try to stay connected, but it's just not the same. It doesn't feel the same. And it doesn't. But it's still really important that we encourage them with their friends, and even with, family members, to, encourage them to FaceTime their grandparents or whatever. Just to kind of give you a visual of how we're staying connected in my home with 2 teenagers. And I asked them for permission to share these pictures. That's my son. Like I said, he's 13, and he's staying connected with his PlayStation. And I never thought that I would be grateful for his PlayStation, because it's usually such a battle. But, during this time, it's been a great way for him to stay connected to his friends and laugh. And, he plays with a bunch of different people. Obviously, we have to limit that, and, he has to go outside and read and do other things too, but that's how he's staying connected. And for my daughter, she has kind of gone back old school and revisited her love of doing crafts, and she made cards for all of her friends and made treats and then delivered them and kind of surprised them. So that was a great way for her to stay connected and stay busy too. This is our last kind of coping is obviously to encourage kids to be physically active, especially if they can get outdoors, that's even better. When we talked about how our stress response system is activated and, you're in that kind of hyper kind of arousal state because you're perceiving a threat, running, walking, dancing are all repetitive motions that can kind of settle your system down. So being active is really, really important. Be firm but flexible. So that's a hard one. And what that is meaning is that you're going to still have some limits in your home, right? Like maybe you still have the limit that we are respectful and there's no swearing. But you might be flexible with, maybe how much time they have social media, or maybe you're flexible with, you're not at them to clean their rooms, right? So you want to really pick your battles, but they need to have limits. They need to have the same kind of, big rules in place because that's going to make them feel more secure right now. At least that's predictable, right? You want to brainstorm with them what might help. So you might say, well, what have you done before that kind of helped when you felt like this? Or, gently suggest, oh, you remember you used to really like to paint. Would you ever want to do something like that? Or, I would be up to going for a hike. Do you think that might be something that would help? And I say suggest gently because, as you probably know, because you were all teenagers at one point, even if you don't have teenagers, teenagers don't really like to be told what to do. Most people don't, but especially teenagers. So just offer it gently. Just suggest things if they are up to hearing it. And the last thing is to stay positive and hopeful yourself. As a parent, be a good role model. Help them to kind of think about the future. This isn't going to last forever. Like, what are you most looking forward to getting back to? Things like that. And sharing what you are excited about and what you're feeling hopeful for. So just to wrap it up, I think we're doing okay for time. Just some final thoughts in case I didn't have a chance to mention it. I couldn't, end without talking about the importance of self-care for all of us. And basically it's how we recharge. So there's a picture of, charging our phones here. We wouldn't let our phones, die and stay at zero. And we can't do that for ourselves either. So it's different for everyone. For me, I need to get out for walks with my dog or talk to my sister on the phone. And that kind of re-energizes me. So find what works for you if you don't already know. And if you know, keep doing it. Practice gratitude. That can be a great way to kind of balance out all the negativity that is out there and think about, what you've really been grateful for, what you're thankful for. That can help us get some meaning out of all of this. A lot of people say they're grateful to have so much time with their family, or that their house has never been cleaner, or that they've really simplified things and slowed down and they can see what's important now, right? And the last one, and I'm a big one that, preaches this all the time, is to practice self-compassion. And that is that you are just kind and gentle with yourself. We've never done this before. It's a very challenging time for everyone, no matter what your circumstance is. And we need to just take it easy with ourselves and be very, very gentle and just accept yourself. We call it radical self-acceptance. You just accept yourself where you're at, no matter what. And that kind of all. And I also wanted to just give out some numbers for our Greater Moncton area, places that you can reach out for help. And I wanted to encourage you to reach out, or if you know of someone that could use some assistance right now, we have a lot of support in our area. So you can see all those numbers on the screen. And obviously, if it's a mental health emergency, that, we always have the option to call 911. And we'll get through this together. So now, hopefully, someone can help me with moderating the questions.
That's where I come in, Kelly.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much for the presentation. Very informative, great presentation. It is now time. We have about 15 minutes available for a Q&A. So if anybody on the call would like to click on the chat button to pose a question, il est maintenant temps pour les questions et réponses. Veuillez cliquer sur le bouton chat si vous souhaitez poser une question. There was one question, Kelly. We have several people on the call whose native language is French, and they're looking for some online resources in French to help, especially with younger children. And I think a couple of the links you just showed there might be appropriate.
Okay, yeah, maybe, for sure. Yeah.
Can you think, like, I know the Beausejour Family Crisis Center, for instance, would be one.
For sure.
And can you advise on a few others?
I would assume that most of those resources would be bilingual. If you're looking for like specific kind of like handouts and videos and all that kind of stuff, probably the Francophone school district might have some. The family and early childhood, I can't remember exactly what it's called in French, but that's also through the school district. I can't remember exactly what it's called in French. Yeah.
Okay. Somebody's also asked if it's possible to get a list of a referral of practitioners or child counselors in the region. You know, other than Atlantic Wellness, there must be a group that specialize in this area.
It's funny that you asked that today because I studied at UNB to do my master's in counseling, and they are doing a master list of New Brunswick of where all the resources are. So that's in the works. So I can certainly share that once that's completed.
Okay.
John, I reached out to some of our team on that one too, and they mentioned that the Kids Help Phone actually has direct links to some Francophone services as well. So to call that number and they can provide that. And just to touch on what Kelly had mentioned, I think the Francophone district, as with the Anglophone district, is working really hard with their guidance teams and support teams to be able to provide services as well or connect kids to services. So so I was certainly encouraged to go that route as well.
Okay, great, thank you. Kelly, you touched on this in your presentation, but for those people on the call, like obviously there are different strategies in helping your younger children cope versus adolescents. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think both are challenging in different ways. I have to say, I think younger kids are a little bit easier in the sense that, you know, you can keep them on a bit more of a schedule, right? It requires a lot more kind of energy, I think, from parents. But if you can keep them on a schedule and keep them active and busy, then they're probably going to be okay. Teenagers, on the other hand, are quite challenging because, you know, they have more independence, they need more independence. So it's really tricky to try to help them to get motivated. And like I said, gently offer suggestions. I think, you know, whether it's an older child or a younger child, as parents, setting a good example is really, really important, because even an older child, a teenager, is still watching their parent, and you're kind of still setting the tone. So if you're keeping your schedule and you're staying positive and you're like eating well and all that kind of stuff, it's going to at least make them feel better that at least my mom or dad is in control and they're staying normal. I don't feel normal, but at least they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think a teacher friend of mine shared something that I thought was really relevant. She said, really, this period could also be a time for kids to rediscover an opportunity to rediscover something. Like you, for instance, mentioned your daughter rediscovering the love of crafts, maybe making a meal or doing other things that might not normally fall into the day-to-day routine.
Absolutely. Yeah. My son, I shared this with our team. He's been cooking a little bit, which he never done before. And he never knew how to open knew how to use a can opener before. So there he's gotten a life skill. But for sure, yeah, it's a great opportunity. With teenagers, it's a little bit harder because, like I said, they kind of have to be the ones that come up with it. So if you brainstorm and kind of give them maybe some ideas, or just like, can you think of anything that you might like to do? Then they might come up with it on their own. And they'll be more apt to do it if they discover it themselves.
I know Andrew has rediscovered his love of ukulele, which we appreciate. So thanks for that.
There you go. Yeah, music can be a great one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was early on in the pandemic, everyone was using the term social distancing, and then thankfully it changed to physical distancing, but social connection. And really the things are very different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad that they changed that term too, because yeah, we really need to still, we have that desire, we're wired for connection. So it's really, really important that we stay connected, and we try to be creative in ways to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I wanted to pose, you mentioned this term, and it was very timely for me because I had one strange dream last night. There is such a thing as pandemic dreaming.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I just came across that, and I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. The article that I read, it said that, you know, our sleep schedules are a little bit messed up right now. So that's one reason for it, but also that we use like kind of our dreams as a way to process what we're going through. And we actually studied that at university, and it was really interesting. So that people are kind of like, they're going through so much during the day that their dreams are kind of helping them to kind of process everything. So people are having these very vivid, kind of bizarre dreams. Yeah. So you've experienced that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought your sprinkling versus storm versus hurricane analogy was particularly relevant. So I guess really as a starting point for people, reflecting on where they're at in that continuum is really a good starting point.
It is. Yeah. And just like I said, accepting it, being okay with it, and you know, knowing that it's probably going to change based on what's happening. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And to accept it in other people, because sometimes we think, oh, well, why would they be upset? They still have this, you know, like, but we don't really know what people are going through. So just to accept ourselves and accept others.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Several posts have thanked you, Kelly, for the presentation, how timely it is. So we appreciate you and Andrew stepping forward and doing this. I just want to take a few minutes to close off. Sure. Once again, thanks very much. And for everyone on the call, you know, we just can't underestimate the importance of mental, especially these days. And even in the days when we come out of the sort of lockdown, because there will be, you know, the new normal won't be the old normal. So we're going to have to keep that in mind. As Andrew mentioned, Atlantic Wellness is one of many not-for-profits that offers services in our region. And like any other not-for-profit and charity I know, I'm sure, you know, Andrew, you're challenged, you know, on the revenue side through this. Fundraising has been basically stopped, yet you're still trying to offer services. So I just want to mention that the Chamber and the United Way are working on another Zoom webinar in the near future that will focus on the needs of our charitable sector and how we can help pull them through the crisis and get them up and operating at full speed again. So stay tuned for that. And if there are any other topics or issues that you'd like us to present, please let us know. We'd be happy to line up expert resources like Kelly to present. There's a little bit of sunlight on the horizon. I think we may hear soon about a phase 1 reopening of New Brunswick, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, thanks again to you, Kelly, and to Andrew for doing the presentation today. Very timely. And just ask everyone to please stay safe and take care of yourselves, and we'll see you another time. Bye for now.
Bye.